Hi, this is Rosalind Higgin and Sean Leister with the Air Quality Bureau. We're going over XML upload. So let's begin with the Air Quality Bureau. You want to get to this page, and the easy way to get to the XML tools is to scroll down. In the middle of the page is we inventory emissions. Inventory is a hyperlink. Click on that. And the next hyperlink is here's the information about submitting your emissions inventory. And click on that. This is where you will find the XML tools. And they're right here under emission inventory submittal methods, emission inventory XML tools dated September 16th, 2020. This is our latest version, and we don't plan on changing it. So if you click on that, it is a zip file, so we recommend that you save the file someplace on your desktop where you can remember where it is. Okay, Sean is saving it under documents. Oh, you know what? I bet you didn't sign in.
Oh no, it did save. It just took a while. There it is right there on the desktop.
Oh, okay. So it's on the desktop. Let's just keep going. And if you open this, you need to extract all the files.
All right, here it is, the extracted version.
Okay. And then click on that and let's look at what all the files are in the zip file are. Okay, the first one that ends in, that says example.xml is an example. And the next one is the schema itself and what it looks like. And the third one that ends in a CCDB is the access file. Now, let's go ahead, instead of using the example file, let's go ahead to AEIR and use an actual AEIR file, XML file for a specific facility.
Great, so thank you, Rosalind. So this is our AEIR environment where you can submit and certify your emissions inventory. Since this has a purple banner up here and it says -Q in the web address, this is our testing environment. And we're using this because we cannot see industry facilities in the normal environment that industry uses. So in order for us to grab an XML file, we will use this testing environment. But for everybody that's using XMLs in industry, you should be able to pull these directly from your AEIR environment and not the testing environment. So since this is a testing environment, I have access to every single facility in New Mexico. And for this example, I'm going to download an XML file for this facility, 326 Arnold Federal Compressor Station. Keep in mind that we have created a new functionality as of last week, I believe, where you can also download bulk XML files. And what I mean by that is for any given company, you can download one XML file for all facilities within that company. So for example, this first company right here is 3 Bear, Delaware Operating. If I click on this link right here, I will be able to download one XML file for each of these facilities, or that contains information for each of these facilities that are underneath 3 Bear, Delaware. And I can do that by clicking on 3 Bear, Delaware and clicking on get current NMED organization data. But for this example, we are going to use an individual facility and for the sake of time as well as simplicity. So under this company and Anadarko Petroleum, there is a facility named Arnold Federal Compressor Station with an AEI number of 326. I can click on this and get the current NMED facility data XML file. And it should show facility ID 326. It'll match this agency ID number right here. Always make sure you're using the correct XML when you are using XML. So be sure you're using the correct data. So I'm going to save this data to my computer. It'll save in my downloads folder. And I can check that it's there by seeing this. For simplicity's sake and for ease of use, I'm going to move this to my desktop with the other files. And you can actually open this XML file with Notepad or with Internet Explorer or some other tool, and you can see what it looks like. So as you can see, XML is pretty hard to read on its own, and that's why we have developed tools that help you parse through this XML data and help you upload it to our AEIR emissions inventory tool. So let's open up this data in a more readable format using this emissions inventory tool. So I can open up this access file. And again, it's, as Roslyn said, it's the 16th of September, 2020. When I open up this tool, you have to enable content right here. And on the control page of this tool, you have a few buttons here. You have these three up here: load file, export file, and clear tables. I'd always suggest to clear your tables before doing anything in here, because you don't want to accidentally double load your data or triple load it. So just clear tables so you're working with a clean slate. You also have these other three tables: facility table, equipment table, and emissions table. Since I've just cleared these tables, there should be no information here. As you can see, they are all blank. And then these last two buttons are just to view your data in differing ways that might help you do QA checks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load that data file that I just downloaded from AEIR. You can also load the example file that is in this folder as well. And we have another video on that if you'd like to see it from a previous training, live training that we did. But for today's example, I'm going to pull an XML file directly from AEIR for AEI 326, load it into here, and manipulate the data so you guys can see how it works, and then load that data up into AEIR, and show you how the entire XML process works.
Oh, so I just wanted to add that if you do want to review where Sean imports the example file, that will be under the 12/16/2020 air training YouTube video. Okay.
Great, thank you, Roslyn. So right now I'll load the file for AEI 326. And it's actually on my desktop. That's the wrong one. So it's right here. AEI 326. I've done this before a few times, so I have a few 326s on my computer. So all the files are on my desktop as of today. So I'll load this file. And it should give a message that the import has been completed. We've chosen, well, actually, I'll go over the tables first. So if I open the facility table, now you can see that the agency interest ID is 326. The reporting year is 2020, which is correct. And you can also add any facility level comments right here. So if you have any comments to add, so you can add facility comments here. And that will be uploaded when I upload the XML. Now, when I close this table, it says, do you want to save the changes to the layout of the table facility? On this one, you can just select no. What this is asking is, since I expanded these columns, and it's asking me if I want to save the expansion of these columns, and I don't really need to do that. You can say yes, but I usually just click on no. The information is saved automatically once you close your tables. So when I open this again, that facility comment is there. But as you can see, the columns have not been expanded. If I open the equipment table now, you see that there is some data here. And it's showing that there is an existing piece of equipment at this facility. And that is one of the reasons why we chose this facility to give as an example, because not all facilities in AEIR will have existing equipment, especially if they're NOIs. And I believe this one is an NOI. So as you can see, there's an existing piece of equipment. The equipment ID is equipment 1. The designation is 001. So it has been linked. And then there's some information here as well. Some of this information is defaulted to 0 or defaulted to nothing because we don't have the information in our database. So for example, in these first few columns where it says new unit category, new unit type, every column with a new in front of it is for new pieces of equipment. So if I create another piece of equipment here, that's the status is new, I would have to fill that information in. However, since this is an existing piece of equipment, that information does not need to be filled in since it already exists in our database and we do not need to collect it again from you. So that is just a gist of what's going on under there. If I go further into this table, there is a question asking whether the equipment was active during the year. If it's yes, enter yes. It should be defaulted to yes. And if it was no, you can change yes to no. And essentially what that does, it allows you to submit this and have essentially 0 emissions from this piece of equipment without having to fill out anything else. So you can just place no right there, upload it to AEIR, and it'll let us know that the piece of equipment did not run for 2020 and therefore emitted no pollutants. But in the normal case scenario, it'll be yes, because if you're reporting to us, it usually will have some sort of emissions. And then we have general parameters next in our list. So fuel type, materials processed, materials consumed, and so on. So the requirements for entering this type of data differs by type of equipment. And what I'd suggest for you to do is on our emissions inventory homepage, our webpage, where we downloaded the XML tool, we also have guidance under the instructions to complete an emissions inventory. It's called our guidance document. If you open that up, we also have quite a lot of information here. And it would be very helpful for you to read through this. But for today's training, Appendix B would be very helpful in terms of uploading XML information to see what is required of each piece of equipment. So in this Appendix B, we have a 3-column table. The first column being the category of each piece of equipment, the type of equipment, and what are the required general parameters of each one. So if you are inputting data, for instance, on this existing piece of equipment, I know that it's an internal combustion engine. So if I scroll down to look for an internal combustion engine, these are the required parameters for an internal combustion engine in terms of details. You can also enter this manually after you've uploaded the XML, but I assume that if you're going through the trouble of using XML, that you want to input all the information via XML and not just some of the information. So be sure to include this information in your XML. And then after that, we have operating hour questions, such as operating hours and hours per day, days per week, weeks per year, and ultimately hours per year. And then we have questions about operating percent per season. So like percent during the spring, fall, summer, and winter. And you can calculate those and put them here. And you can also input any comments you have right here as well for any individual piece of equipment. So these are different comments than the facility level comments. And I also wanted to go over how you can add new pieces of equipment in here. So when I loaded this file originally, it only had one piece of equipment, but you can use this tool. And what this tool was created for was to be linked to a database so that you can transfer your database data to this tool to create an XML. Or you can copy data from like an Excel sheet and copy the data into here to load it into an XML. And the third option is to manually enter your data as we will do today. The tool wasn't meant for you to manually edit this data and upload it to AEIR, but it does work that way if that's how you want to use it. So if I want to, I can add another piece of equipment here. So for example, the AI 326 would be the same AI. The status of the piece of equipment I'm adding is new, and you can only add new pieces of equipment to NOIs and GCP 2, 3, 5, and 6. All other types of facilities will be required to either request an override from us to add new pieces of equipment or contact our permitting section to traverse how to update your permit and add new pieces of equipment or get rid of all pieces of equipment if they are no longer at your facility. For this new piece of equipment, I will not enter an equipment ID because that is auto-generated by NMED when the new piece of equipment is added. So I'll just give a designation, which is the name that you give your piece of equipment for your facility. So it's your own name, so just make sure to type a name that is easily identifiable by you. So for example, 001, it's not a great name, but it is a valid name. So for this one, I'm going to try to use a better name. I'm gonna add a tank. So I'm just going to call it tank 1. And under category, there's a drop-down menu. A tank is located under equipment, and for the type, it's going to be a tank above ground. So this is another example of where our guidance can help people during the XML process. In our guidance document, under Appendix A, we have all of the relationships between any given category and any given type. So make sure that your category matches to your type. And by that, I mean that, for example, under the category of activity, these are all of the associated types under activity. So do not select your category as activity and then use a type that's under the category of area, because that won't be a valid XML. And an example I used the category of equipment and the type of tank above ground, which is in the category of equipment in our Appendix A. So this can be useful. And then there's a new unit description here. And for this, I'll just give a little bit of a longer description. This is a condensate tank. If you have, so all the required information here is the same required information that is required when you are entering your equipment manually in AEIR. So it would be useful to check what is required when you enter your equipment manually, as we do in our usual trainings, and enter information accordingly. So in our manual trainings, the manufacturer information isn't required, but if you do know that information, please input it here. Same with the rated capacity, that's not required, but if you know that information, put it here. Same with the construction date, but what is required is the SCC. And I just happen to know that for this condensate tank, the SCC is going to be a number here, but you can also use a drop down to choose your number. But I would suggest going into the official EPA links that we have in our guidance document and trying to find your SCC through official channels. So I'm going to type in this SCC, which I know is for a condensate tank, a fixed roof condensate tank with working, breathing, and flashing losses, to be specific. And then also right here, you have stack information. So each new piece of equipment requires the input of a stack. So I'm just going to say this is tank 1 stack for the description. For the stack type, I'll say it's a fugitive. And in our guidance, any fugitive stack will have a default height of 10. But if you have more accurate information, I'd suggest to put the more accurate information in. For right now, I'm just going to put 10. And for a fugitive stack, none of these other stack parameters should be entered. They should just be left alone. For other types of stacks, such as vertical stacks, you will want to put in the, well, it will be required to put in the temperature, flow rate, velocity, as well as inside diameter. And those are all the required pieces of information to add a new piece of equipment. And the rest of this information will be to actually fill out the details of that piece of equipment. As before with the existing piece of equipment with the internal combustion engine, you can fill out this information using Appendix B for what is required. And you would also fill out the operating hours per day and per week, per year, and operating hours in general, and then the percent operation. And you can also write your comments here. I'm going to close this table now and move on to our last table, which is the emissions table. So this is, do you want to save any changes to the layout? I'm going to say no, then. And the last table is the emissions table. Now, when I open this up, you'll see that the way it's organized is you have the AEIR number and then the equipment and designation for the piece of equipment they're adding pollutants to. Then you have the pollutant code, the pollutant description, the amount of pollutants, and then a measure and the calculation method that you use to calculate the amounts that was emitted into the atmosphere. We have been notified and have found a potential problem here with pollutant codes being none and unit of measure being pounds per hour. So until we can get that fixed where those are just not in XML itself, we suggest that you delete all of these ones. So to do this, you can click on one of these values here and click on the selection button. You can say equals none. Select all of these and hit delete. So you're about to delete these 8 records and say yes, that you do want to delete those. I'm going to toggle the filter back. And then I'm going to click on pounds per hour. Since those aren't accepted by our system either, click on selection equals pounds per hour. These 3 will not be accepted, so I'm going to just delete them. You're about to delete the 3 records, say yes, toggle the filter again. Now these pollutants will be accepted by us. They're in tons per year, and I can give a valid estimate. I can also add more pollutants here as well. So let's say I want to add another pollutant for equipment 1, designation 001, pollutant code. I can choose a pollutant code from this list, or I can enter a pollutant code if I know what it is. So for instance, if I want to add SO2, sulfur dioxide, to my equipment 1, I can enter that, and I would put tons per year under the measurement. And under the calculation method, I would enter the calculation method that was used to calculate these emissions. So it might be EPA emission factors AB42 is probably a very common one. I can also add emissions for that new piece of equipment that was added. So for that one, the equipment ID, it doesn't have one since it hasn't been registered yet under NMED. So I will just put tank 1 under the designation to link to say that these are the emissions from tank 1. And I can input VOC, for instance, and also tons per year, and enter how I calculated those emissions. So I'm going to say that these were also emission factor is AP42. And notice that these first three were defaulted to estimate calculation methods. Be sure to change those accordingly to whatever calculation method you actually used. So I'm just going to put AP42 because that is a common one, as I said before. And I'm just going to put some numbers here so that you can see that it actually works. So I'll put 66, 5. Okay, so now when I upload this information into AEIR, we should be able to see these pollutants and these amounts accordingly. We're going to close this table here, and it should save. And at this point, I've entered in enough information to upload it to AEIR. Be sure I didn't upload, or I didn't enter the information for details or for operating hours. So be sure when you're actually doing the XML upload, put in information such as field type or operating hours per year and % operation during each season. So I'm going to export this file right now. And I'm going to say that this is, I'm going to name my file something that will help me know what it is. So I will call it XML 12/21/2020, and this is training. And I'll download it to my desktop. It'll show, yeah, it says if I would like to open the file, I'll say yes. I want to open it in Notepad just to show you all. And as you can see here, this is what the XML file looks like in Notepad. The reporting year is 2020. You have an existing piece of equipment, which is equipment 1. You have the information for that equipment. And then you have another new piece of equipment with the designation of tank 1 and the information relevant to that piece of equipment as well. And I'll close that. It says that the data has been exported and everything is good to go. One other thing with that newly exported data is if I open it in Notepad again, I can change the information in this Notepad file itself, and it will upload just fine if the change is a correct change or a valid change to our schema. So for instance, instead of having an amount of 22 tons per year for this VOC pollutant on our tank, I can change it to 200 tons per year, and I can save it, and it should be valid. So if you feel like you need to make a small change or something that's not so significant to an XML file directly, you can do so. If you're making a more drastic change, we would probably suggest that you use the actual tool to make the change instead of doing it directly in the XML file itself, because that could be rather complicated. So I'm going to just close this, and I'm going to open AEIR to upload that XML. So I'm in AEIR right now. One of the things with XML is that you can't have a submittal already created to upload your XML. So I'm going to upload an XML for 2020, for the year 2020, and the AI 326, which hasn't been created yet. If a submittal has been created, you would have to click on the radio button next to the 2020 submittal, go to the bottom of the page, and select delete this submittal, which is this red button down here. Right here, delete this in-process submittal before you can upload a new 2020 XML. And I will, but since 2020 hasn't been created yet, we will be fine in the training. So to upload the XML, I'll click on browse this data under the section of create a new emissions inventory submission. There's an XML area, so I can browse my computer for an XML, and I've downloaded it to my desktop. And this is the one that we just worked with. We just exported. I will open that file, and I'll click on this blue import an XML data file for a new submittal. So when it asks me a question about selecting the reporting year, it'll say that since no reporting year was selected, it'll be the reporting year used in the XML. And since the XML has a reporting year of 2020, that's okay. So we can just continue. So just make sure that you're using 2020 for your reporting year when you're submitting your 2020 emissions inventory. And once I click OK, it'll bring up this box where it is loading the XML, comparing it to our schema to make sure it's valid, and then giving us any relevant error messages and telling us if it was a successful upload. So it has gone through that process. It says that the XML has been processed, and here's the information. It's valid against our schema, which is good. And it's just giving us some warnings here, it looks like. So it says that for equipment 1, the sum of % operation per season does not add up to 100%. That's because we left each one at 0%. So make sure that when you're uploading XML, you can either upload that information at the same time. So put the % operation for each of season and make sure they add up to 100%. And the same error we get for tank 1 is the same thing. So you can either do that in the XML itself or manually do it later on. And as I said before, you likely want to do it in the XML itself if you're going through the trouble of using XML. So the data has been saved in AEIR. Please review your information to ensure accuracy. The XML import process has been completed. So that's a good message. So I can close this message and reload my submittals on the page so that everything is good to go. So just be sure to refresh your page before moving forward. And this is just taking a while because it's in the testing environment and because I have every single facility in my testing environment. So for you, it should be much faster. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reload the page, go into the submission for 2020 for AEIR 326 and make sure that the XML upload is accurate and complete. Well, not complete because we didn't put in all the information, but it's accurate to what information that we did intend for it to have. So right now my page has been reloaded. If I search up AEIR 326, there is a 2020 submittal in process. I'll click on that radio button next to it and edit the submittal by clicking on this yellow button. And as you can see, there is an existing piece of equipment, which is an internal combustion engine, and that new piece of equipment for the tank that we just uploaded. If I click on the radio button next to the internal combustion engine and enter my details, you'll see I didn't put in any of this information, so there's nothing to show here, but you can edit this right now if you want to and save it. And I will check on the emissions as well. And as you can see, the emissions data has been uploaded and it's in tons per year and AP42 as calculation methods. Again, make sure that you're using the relevant calculation methods. And then I'll check the tank, the newly added piece of equipment. And under details, again, there should be nothing here essentially because we did not enter this data in the XML, but be sure to do so if you want the data to show up here, which is suggested. And then if I click on emissions for the tank, you'll see that it is 200 tons per year, and which is what we just changed a little while ago. Okay, so the last thing is, well, actually not the last thing, right here, I forgot. We put in this facility level comment, and you can see it right here, which is just goes to show that that works as well. And once all of the details information and emissions information for each of these two types, or each equipment is entered, a complete check will show up right here. So you can enter all the relevant information for details and emissions into the XML, and a complete check should just show up here automatically once you upload your XML. And at that point, you can go ahead and review your submittal and then certify your submittal for your 2020 emissions inventory. And I believe that's all we need to go over during this training. Do you have anything else to add, Roslyn, or should we call it?
I think that's everything. Once you fill in the information about the hours and the emissions on both of these units, one of them being existing and one of them being new, then a green check mark will appear, as Sean mentioned, and then it will automatically populate this facility. And remember, for certification process, they need to be done individually. But I think we can wrap this one up. Thank you so much, Sean.
Yeah, thank you.